morning, everybody. Just get set up over here. I just want to open up in prayer, and then we'll hop into it. Heavenly Father, thank you for your love for us. Jesus, it is such a privilege to come before you in this moment and to open up your word and to see what you have for us, Lord. So just speak through us, or speak through your word, Lord, to us, and just amaze us by what you want to speak. So we love you. We pray this in your name. Amen. Yeah, my name is Rhett. I'm the high school pastor here at Anthem Chapel. Nate Wagner, the lead pastor, is out of town in Mexico, so I could do his job for him today. We are going to be typically going through the book of Romans on a Sunday morning, but we're taking a break for this week, and also in 2 weeks, Pastor Monty, the junior high pastor, is speaking. And so we're taking a little bit of a break, kind of fun. If you see me fiddling with this, it's Nate's gone, so I took his little face thing right here, you know? But it just feels weird, like I'm trying to sell a timeshare or something. So if I touch it, I'm not used to it. But I first want to say thank you. Before WindShape, we had our junior high school summer camp. It was an absolute blessing. Children's lives were changed by the power of the gospel. And that was because you guys faithfully gave to support some students who couldn't financially afford it to make it, and also through your prayers. So we just want to thank you for that. At summer camp, we're studying the life of David. And so we're going to take a little look into the life of David this morning. In 2 weeks, Pastor Monty is also going to be talking about the life of David. And it's also what we talked about at WindShape. So it's kind of full circle coming in and the life of David this morning. As we look at the life of David, he is known by this title. You might know it, the man after God's heart. That is just like the honor, the title that the Bible has given David, a man after God's heart. And he did have an absolutely incredible life. We see him defeating Goliath in the beginning, right? We see him becoming the king of Israel. We see just his graciousness and his truth to the people that he is serving. A life, of just incredible highs, but also a life of incredible lows, right? We see he committed adultery and killed the woman's husband to try to cover it up. In the beginning of his life, we actually saw him siding with the enemies of Israel to actually fight against Israel. And the enemies were like, you probably shouldn't do this, David. And so he didn't. But we just see this life of highs and lows. But we still look at him and it says, man, he's a man after God's heart. And this morning, we're going to look at a story that we don't always look at in the life of David, but it's going to be in 1 Kings chapter 2. And it's going to be kind of the last words that David gives to his son Solomon before David dies. Before we get into it, though, this is going to be a little crazy. I want to do something a little different. Everyone pull your phone out right here, okay? Pull it out. Pull it out. Something a little different. I'm going to take your phone, and I want you to turn it completely off. I don't even know. Here we go. I think you squeeze it. Look, I'll do it just to show everyone. Boom. It is possible to turn it all the way off. I want us to kind of take a break for a moment and turn our phones off. Now, you might be saying, my Bible's on my phone. Don't worry. The words will be on another screen right in front of you, right here. You might be thinking, what if there's an emergency and I'm the only person in the world that can solve that problem? You probably aren't. So let's just take a moment, turn the phones off. We're going to be opening up God's word before us this morning. And I really want to just kind of give honor to God's word and say, man, in the same way, we wouldn't be on our phone, texting, calling, whatever, and if we're having a conversation. In the same way, we're coming before the Lord right now, and he might have something, he does have something to speak to you. And I don't want us to miss that because we are being distracted by something else. We constantly in life are letting just the busyness of life interrupt God. Okay, I'm not going to read my Bible because I don't have time. I'm not going to pray because I just got to get out the door. I'm not going to go to church because it's not really that convenient. We're constantly letting life interrupt God. But really, for a moment, maybe for the first time in your life, let's let God interrupt our busy life and just take a break and see what he has for us in his word. Okay, all phones off? All phones? Probably my high schoolers are the only people who aren't turning their phones off, but prove me wrong. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4 of 1 Kings chapter 2, and they'll be up on the screen. But 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 1 says, Now the days of David drew near that he should die, And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do, and wherever you turn, that the Lord may fulfill his word which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth, with all of their heart, with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. I'm going to pray. Heavenly Father, your word has been read. Man, you speak now. Don't let me speak, Lord. If anything is of me, just let it not even come out of my mouth. Lord, I want your word to speak to us this morning. Just give us ears, Lord, even as we took a moment to kind of turn the phones off, turn the buzz of the world off. We are here, committed, dedicated to hearing from you this morning. So we love you, Jesus. We pray this in your name. Amen. I'm going to start again in verse 1 and 2. So let's read those again. 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Now the days of David drew near that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. And David, he's getting old. He's lived a long and hard life. And he comes to the point and he looks at his son and says, I am about to die. I'm not going to make it much longer. And death really is not a topic that we in our society really like to think about. We're really concerned with trying to live as long as possible, as comfortably as possible, and that's a good life, right? We don't like to think about death. We have places where we send people if they're about to die. Our pets, we send them off to the vet so that they can take care of business, so we don't have to watch them suffer. We shelter our kids from death so that they don't have to be sad from it. But really, as Christians, we have to realize that death for the Christian is not a bad thing. For the Christian, death is just the beginning, really, of true life. And I was kind of studying and thinking about, death and our culture. I came across an article called, Which Country is the Best Place to Die? And I was like, yes, let's find out. But I had this quote in it, and it says, quote, the United States didn't win, so oh well. It says, of note, the United States earned a C ranking, 43rd of the 81 countries, with a middle score of 71.5. Commenting on why the U.S. ranked so poorly, especially compared to other high-income countries, Finkelstein, unfortunate name, said that Americans often spend tons of money on excessive, often futile treatments and surgeries aiming to extend life at the dusk of one's existence, sometimes just for weeks or months, rather than focusing and ensuring the quality of life at the end, end quote. Our society is really just pushing, in that study, the UK won, so obviously something was wrong. But as Christians, we do not have to fear death. We do not have to fear death. It's not something we should be anxious about or get stressed about. But really, as Christians, we understand that death is really the doorway into everlasting life with the Lord. And it's ironic as Christians that we often view death as a loss of life, right? We think, there's such a loss of life. But really, when we view God's word, we see that the Christian who dies is actually experiencing more life, more fully than they ever have before. I think what Paul says in Philippians chapter 1:21 on the screen, it says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. It's actually a gain for us as Christians when we pass away. As Christians, I just feel like we really sometimes have no idea just how great the gain is after death. If we actually have the next verse on the screen, it is in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And this is Paul writing, and it says, I know such a man, he's actually referring to himself, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows. But it says how he was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. Paul's actually saying, the Lord revealed to me the goodness that's waiting for us. And he said, it would actually be a crime for me to try to even describe how good it's going to be. And this is the glory and the prize, really, that is awaiting the Christian at the end of their life. Of all the people I've met in my life, maybe you've heard of him before, but my dad is maybe the most excited person I've ever met to die. He is just so excited to meet Jesus face to face. And that was just always inspiring to me. I thought, man, this is a guy who is actually, he believes that he's on his way to heaven. My dad, if you didn't know him, he was a chiropractor. And so right before he left, a patient came to our house, actually. And this guy was not a Christian, but he came to get adjusted one last time. But he actually just told, I don't know why he said this to me, but he said, my favorite thing about your dad is that he is so excited to meet Jesus. And this is coming from a guy that is not a Christian. And I just thought it was weird. I was like, I wonder why he said that to me, But I know, man, when the day comes that my dad is going to pass away, of course I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to be so stoked for him because this is the thing he has been waiting for his whole life. He's just so excited that one day he's going to see Jesus and he's going to meet him. And I don't want to belittle the fact that losing someone is hard. Man, it is difficult. But the reality for the Christian, the reality of where they are before the throne of God, looking at the face of Jesus, should never overshadow our reality that we don't see them anymore. Man, the reality that they are before the throne has to be foremost in our minds. I think about when you're going on a trip, right? You're packing, you're preparing, you're getting time off work, and a person could look at your life and they say, okay, obviously he's going somewhere. Right? You're packing your board shorts. Maybe you're going to Hawaii. You're packing your snow clothes. Maybe you're going skiing. And so a person can tell when you're preparing to leave. And the idea is kind of the way you prepare is revelatory of your destination. Right? Your preparation reveals your destination. If you're packing board shorts, you're going to the beach. If you're packing snow clothes, you're probably not going to the beach. I don't know, maybe you are. But your preparation reveals your destination. And as Christians, we need to treat heaven like, get this, a real place. Because it is a real place that if you call yourself a Christian, if you have faith in Jesus, he is your Lord, you are going to actually go there one day. And there should be ways that you are preparing to go to heaven. Right? We see Jesus says, follow in my steps and the way that I served and the way that I loved. Man, I think even tithing is giving up an earthly, momentary possession to store up an eternal, spiritual possession. I think about praying. Man, you should be praying as you prepare to go to heaven because you're talking to the one that you are about to meet. I think about being generous to others because God has been so generous to you. And sometimes I feel like we can treat heaven like it's this fairy tale place, right? It's like, okay, heaven is like, okay, heaven, maybe I'll get there one day, but, there's nothing I can really do about it right now. And I think if we have thinking like this, it's going to be impossible to live the way that God has told you to live in this world. And so the question kind of in my mind as I was reading these verses is heaven a real place for me? And I want you to kind of ask yourself this question right now. Is heaven a real, literal place that you are going to be one day? Is that how you view it? Is that how you think about it? And if the answer is yes, if you have, yes, I believe heaven is real, I would ask, okay, does your life then reflect that? Would someone who's looking at your life agree and say, yes, that person, they're living for eternity? It's not about how much money they make. It's not about their position here on earth, but their life is pointed towards and aiming towards a place that they are not yet. And so often we can answer with yes, right? Of course I believe heaven's real, but our lives really don't reflect that truth. We're more concerned with building our business than building God's kingdom. We're more concerned with where our kids are going to go to college than where our kids are going to spend their eternity. We're more concerned with keeping up with the news rather than keeping up with what God says to us in his word. So if your answer is yes, I'll ask, does your life then reflect that truth? Does your life reflect the fact that I believe I'm going to heaven and that heaven is everything? And here's the thing. If we really don't believe that heaven is a real place, if our lives don't reflect the fact that we believe heaven is a real place, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult, maybe even impossible, to convince anyone else that heaven is real. Because someone's going to look at your life And so, okay, this guy's a Christian, but his life looks nothing like he's going to heaven. He's like living in the moment. He's doing his thing. And they're going to think, if you don't believe it, why should they? And so really, as Christians, this is the thing that should be setting us apart. The hope of heaven. The joy that we're going to see Jesus one day. The knowledge that, man, this earth is temporary. It's not going to last. And this is what should be setting us apart, but oftentimes it's the thing that we're not even thinking about, right? But David understood this fact. He says, hey, I'm going the way of all the earth. And then he goes really into this beautiful encouragement and admonition of his son in verses 3 and 4. It says, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do. And wherever you turn, that the Lord may fulfill his word which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. And so David's looking at his son. He says, I'm passing on. I'm leaving soon. Be careful to follow after the Lord. He says, man, just obey the Lord. Obey his testimonies. Obey his commandments to you. And by obeying the Lord, therefore, then enjoy the blessings of the Lord. And if you remember last week, Nate talked that we are not under the what? Anyone remember? The law, but we are under grace, right? And God gives us these instructions to protect us and to direct us and to bless us. However, in this passage, you can read it and sometimes think like it's kind of an if-then circumstance, right? God's saying, if you follow me, then I will bless you. And you might be thinking like, okay, if it's all about grace, just grace, 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 why can't I just receive the Lord's blessing even when I don't obey? And my answer to that would be, you do actually. We are all sinners. We've all fallen short, whether it's in the past or in the present, and it's going to be in the future. We all fall short, and we still receive the blessing of the Lord. We still receive the salvation of the Lord. We still receive the faithfulness of the Lord. And my answer is, you might think, okay, well, what is it? You're still blessed. You know, you're still blessed even when we fall short. However, there is an aspect where following the Lord does bring blessing, and here's where it lies. I think as we seek our own way, as we seek our own desires, really what we're doing is seeking to bless ourselves, isn't it? It's like, I want that new house. I want that new car. I want that new boat. And so I'm just going to go get it, and then once I get it, my life is going to be better, right? Who doesn't want a boat? Or I'm going to be greedy so that I can just keep all my junk, and then if I have all this stuff, then I'll be happy. Or it's okay, I'm going to just kind of cut corners and running my business and tell maybe a little untruth. It's not a lie, because it's going to save me a ton of money, right? So often, when we place ourselves in that position, the reason obedience, rather, on the other hand, the reason why obedience brings about the blessing of the Lord is because obedience places the Lord in the position of blesser in your life. Obedience says, okay, God, I'm going to follow what you say, I'm going to obey what you say, and I'm going to allow you to control the outcome, right? And therefore, when God controls the outcome, it is blessing. That's what it is. However, disobedience says, okay, God, I'm going to do what I want so that I can try to control the outcome. And obedience brings about blessing for the only reason that it places God in the position of blesser in your life. Do you want the Lord's outcome for your life, or do you want to try to bring about your own outcome for your life? I'll just tell you right now, you can't outbless the Lord. You cannot outbless the Lord. However much you give to him, he always gives more back. That is just who the Lord is. I was just thinking in my notes, it says God's always going to come up with something better than you can come up with. And that's the truth. If we obey what the Lord says, the outcome that he has is so much better than anything you could ever come up with. And so this is kind of that reason I feel like, man, he's saying, okay, the blessing of the Lord follows the obedience of the Lord. And so like David, he goes from this incredible encouragement to his son just to follow the Lord, pursue his commandments, and he'll bless you. He grows from this basically into like a hit list of people to kill, It's big highs, big lows, right? So let's look actually starting in verse 5. It says, moreover, you know what Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner the son of Ner and Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. And he shed the blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war on his belt that was around his waist, on his sandals, on his feet. Therefore, do according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. Gnarly, right? And so I don't have the time to get into the whole aspect of who this guy Joab was, but basically, he was a leader in the armies of David. And in many ways, he was loyal to David, but he was not obedient to David. He was a guy that, okay, yeah, maybe he'll follow David, but if he thinks of a better way to do it, he's going to do it. And he was very ruthless and violent in furthering his own position and furthering his own power in the kingdom. Not a good guy, right? And so David looks at this guy's life after just, this beautiful encouragement. He says, remember Joab? Go take care of him. And then verse 7, it says, find my place, but show kindness to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. For so they came to me when I fled from Absalom, your brother. Again, just very brief overview. This guy, the sons of Barzillai, during David's reign, one of his sons actually tried to usurp the throne. All right, and so David had to flee from his palace and from Jerusalem and hid out in the wilderness. And this guy brought food and supplies to Israel or to David and his army just to refresh them and to encourage them. And so Joab, kill him. Barzillai, bless him. Next, Shimei, verse 8. And see, you have with you Shimei, I don't know how you want to say it, Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjaminite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a malicious curse, and the day when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death by the sword. Now therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man, and know what you ought to do to him. But bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. Gnarly again. Just a little background. When David was fleeing from Absalom, his son, like we talked about before, this guy Shimei actually found him and his troop, his army, leaving with him, and just basically started railing him. He's just like, David, you're just a scumbag. You had this coming to you. He was cursing David, throwing rocks at David. And actually, at this, one of David's men just said, let me just go chop this guy's head off. That's literally what he said. But David responds in such a gracious way to this guy who was cursing him. And I actually want to read David's response in 2 Samuel 16. I think I have yes, there we go. It says, but the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? And David said to Abishai, and all of his servants, see how my son who came from my own body seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjaminite? Let him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has ordered him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. And as David and his men went along the road, Shimei went along the hillside opposite of him and cursed him as he went, and threw stones at him and kicked up dust. It is extraordinarily hard to take criticism well. It's extraordinarily hard, no matter who you are. It's hard to take criticism well. I actually came across a quote by a guy named Norman Vincent Peale. And it says, more Christians are willing to be ruined by praise than to be saved by criticism. And that's the truth. It is so much easier. You just want to hear people say, great sermon, Rhett. I don't want to get hummed. Actually, my greatest fear, the reason I'm nervous when I get up here, is I think, what if I actually say something that's not true? What if I get up there and just say something totally off? And that's why I get a little nervous. But, we want people to praise us naturally. That's what we want. But so often we grow more from criticism than from praise. And David took this criticism well. He said, okay, I know that the Lord has allowed this, but I also know that the Lord is going to defend me, and the Lord is going to avenge me as well. And the end of the story, David, he comes back, and he's the king over Israel, and he rules. And this guy, Shimei, basically comes back, and he says, sorry for what I said, didn't mean it. And David says, okay, you can go. You can go. I'm not going to hold this against you. You can go in peace. But we see here at the end of his life, he thinks back on Shammai, and he says, Solomon, I promised that I would not kill Shammai, but guess who could? You. And it's just like a weird thing, You're like, this guy, David, he promised that he wouldn't, but now he's asking his son to do this. It's just like a really weird couple of verses. I think of the last words this guy says, and these are some of the last commands he gives. It's just very interesting. And some people say, looking at this, that David's not wrong in trying to kill these people because he's just trying to establish justice before he dies, right? These people, they deserve, in a sense, they did deserve what was coming to them. And the Lord stopped it, and David stopped it. But really, I was just thinking, if anyone deserved justice at the end of their life, who should be on that list as well? David himself. It'd just be weird that, David looks back on the life of grace that the Lord showed him, undeserved favor that the Lord shows him. He's like, man, Lord, in light of all the grace you have given me, I'm just going to give these people what's coming. It seems weird to me. Some other people say that David had good intentions, that he was trying to establish his son Solomon's reign before he dies, right? Establish his son Solomon's reign. But even then, I look back on the life and the promises that God gave to David. And who was the one that said he would establish David's reign? It was God, was it not? And I see David kind of in that position of blessing and blessor, right? David is saying, okay, am I going to try to establish my reign in my own power and my own wisdom? Or am I going to let the Lord establish my reign because he promised to do so? Establishing his son's dynasty and reign really was not David's job. That was the Lord's job. That was the promise that the Lord had given him. And since the Lord had given this promise to him, if they obeyed, the Lord would keep his promises. It wouldn't matter what guy came up against the throne, what circumstance came up against the throne, the Lord would keep his promise. And so just an interesting section, to say the least, an interesting last couple of words that this man gives, last commands that he gives. And I'm honest, I don't pretend to understand. I know exactly what David was thinking here. Was it justice? Was it revenge? Was it establishment? I do not fully know what David thought of this moment, but it did make me think for myself, when I am in this position that David is in, what am I going to be thinking on my deathbed? Right, because we see what David was thinking about, but I was really questioning. I was like, okay, Lord, what am I going to be thinking about on that day? And one word that the Lord kind of put on my heart was this idea of regret. There's actually a quote, I believe I have it. Yeah, a poem. It says, for all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these, it might have been. Rhyme. John Greenleaf Whittier. No idea who that is, but regret maybe is one of those worst feelings that you could feel at the end of your life. I can't imagine someone on their deathbed. They look back and they just think like, what a waste. What a waste. That would be, that just, weighs heavy on my heart. Man, what a burden that would be. And I don't think necessarily David looked back on his life with regret. He lived an incredible life. He wrote God's word down, God's heart in the Psalms. He led the armies of Israel to victory. He lived an incredible life of devotion to the Lord, yeah. A lot of ups and a lot of downs, like we saw. And I don't think he regretted that, but I do think there were things in David's life that he did regret. And it's kind of this idea that I was thinking, if I died today, would I kind of have this sense of regret in my life? Would I look back and say, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that, I wish I'd been more devoted to the Lord? And I don't want to look back one day and have regrets about the missed opportunities in my marriage. I don't want to look back and have regrets about the way I raised my children and led my family. I don't want to have regrets about the ways I spent my time. I actually have another verse in 2 Timothy chapter 4. And these are kind of the last words of Paul. And these are some incredible last words. It says, for I'm already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. When I die, I want to have last words like these, right? Like, Lord, I ran the race. I fought the fight. I kept the faith. I want to come before the Lord one day and say, like, God, I did my very best. I did everything I thought you wanted me to do. I put it all on the line for you. But so often, we just kind of, twiddle our thumbs, think death is very far away, which for some of us closer than others, maybe. But we never know. You never know, right? And for us to get to this point of saying, I have fought the fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith, it might take us, maybe turning this off a little more often in your life, right? For the fathers, maybe it takes a break from trying to climb that occupational ladder and just be present with your family and to lead them in the way that God has told you to lead them. It might take getting rid of the feeling that you need to convince the world that your husband and your kids are perfect and just get rid of social media and look to God as your role model rather than Instagram as your role model. It might take you to be vulnerable with someone and say, I am struggling with this and I want help. Maybe being vulnerable with a friend, a family member, a mentor. Maybe being vulnerable with God. Maybe that is the next step for you. But really, that first step to take is always the hardest, right? The first step is always the hardest step to take. But of all the past decisions you've made, the most important decision is the next decision, right? So, okay, we have this truth before us. We understand God's word to us. We understand our destiny as Christians. And so what are we going to do now in light of that? You might be thinking back on all the stuff you have done, but maybe the Lord is trying to refocus us and say, okay, I know what you've done as well. What are you going to do now with the Lord? I look at verse 10, kind of wrapping this up, and worship team, you can come back up now. It says, so David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The period that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. Then Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Solomon's kingdom was not firmly established because he went out and killed these guys instantly. That's not what happened. But Solomon's kingdom was firmly established because that is the promise that the Lord had given him. In the same way, if we want to enjoy those blessings of the Lord, man, it takes a step of obedience to really see those through fully. I think it's time, especially in my life, but in our lives as Christians, to really stop pretending like heaven is a fairy tale and really start believing that it is a place that we are going to go one day. Death, it comes for everyone. Some of us, like I said, sooner than later. But you never know when it's going to come. And what do you want to be able to say about your life when it does come? I think even more importantly, what do you want to be able to say? What would God say about your life when that day comes? The Lord is going to look at us, and as Christians, as we enter into heaven, he's going to say, well done, my good and faithful servant. And those are the words I want to hear. I want to hear those words when I walk up. And when I die, I don't want my life to be a waste. And I know you don't want your life to be a waste, right? And so whatever that next step of faith is for you, I'd say today's the best day to make it, right? And maybe you're thinking, I want to take this next step, but I honestly don't even know what that step would be. I would really encourage you to get prayer this morning then. There's going to be, as we worship, there's going to be prayer teams in the front and the back corners scattered around. And if you're thinking, I want to take that next step of faith in my life, I don't even know what it would be, though, I'd encourage you, go get prayer this morning. Here at Anthem, we are full-time staff dedicated here to helping you pursue the Lord with 100% of your life. That's what we're here for. And so if you want to take those next steps, you want that accountability, you want that mentorship, man, we are here for you to pour into you and to walk alongside you. We'd love to meet with you and talk about the ways that the Lord wants to use you. That's really what Lars does. He goes over spiritual gifts with you and say, what might the Lord have equipped you to do in his kingdom? But in the next moment, we're just going to worship. And so the prayer team's going to be up. If the Lord has spoken to you, go get prayer. I can't emphasize it enough. Go get prayer. And he'll speak again. He'll direct you and guide you in the ways he wants us to go. Amen? I'm going to pray for us, and we'll get into worship. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for your love for us. I just thank you, Lord, that, man, I think about you, Jesus, on the cross. When you died, you had no regrets. You do not look at us with regret and say, man, I shouldn't have done that. But man, you didn't have regrets. You said for the joy that was set before you, you endured the cross. Lord, we want to live lives like you did, fully committed, Jesus. And whatever that next step is for us, just make it clear, Jesus. Help it not to be a step of furthering our own kingdom, but a step of saying, I want to further the Lord's kingdom. I want to live like heaven is real. On that day I walk before the Lord, I want to walk with confidence. Lord, we will walk with confidence, but help us to walk with confidence in the here and the now, Jesus' Son. Maybe there's just something we have to let go of in our life, Lord, to fully say, man, heaven is my home. Heaven is my destination. And maybe that's going to require us to let that something go. Speak to us what that might be, Jesus. I pray that in this moment, if we spoke because we turned our phones off, that you'd give us the strength to turn it off more frequently. That we'd set apart that time and say, God, I'm here for you. I'm not going to let the world interrupt this time. I'm going to be devoted to you. Lord, help our minds to be that way. I'm not going to let the world flood my mind with what it says. I want the Lord to flood my mind with what you say. So we thank you, Jesus. Thank you that you're calling us home one day. Give us the strength to take the steps you're calling us to take. We love you. We pray this in your name. Amen.